So the agenda for this meeting is to just go through the upstream CephFS Trello backlog board. I'll put a link in the chat if you want to follow along locally. I think everyone should be able to have access to that. It says it's a public board. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, again, this is an upstream Trello. I think Stage uses this a lot to try to keep track of what's going on in the project as a whole. I myself, I normally look at the Redmine tracker, but we try to periodically synchronize this with the Trello. So we're going to go through the Trello. We're try to reflect accurately what's in the Trello for what we're going to work on in Quincy. Let me also link the Quincy feature search, which everyone should have access to for Redmine. This is also just not just an exercise in updating the Trello. It's also we actually are trying to plan out what we're going to work on for the Quincy release. All right. So let's start with going through all these cards that we have in the CephFS. What do we call these boards? Anyway, and just give like status updates on where we are and whether or not we want to commit to getting it done in the Quincy release. If we are, then we'll keep the Quincy label. Otherwise, we'll remove it and it can just stay backlogged. So with that said, any questions before we start? No? All right. So let's begin with multi-MDS export thrashing. Siddharth, I believe this is something you've been working on. Where are we with this PR?
Yeah, so this PR is ready, Patrick, but one of the tests failed because of an issue with the MDS, for which I had sent a patch. I think that needs to be merged in first. Then only all the tests are gonna pass. So I linked that PR in the chat. Give me a second.
Okay.
Yeah, so this one's been needing review for a while, and this one's also ready.
All right. I'll just make a note that it's blocked on that. Okay. So we'll just leave this for Quincy for now. Let's move on to MDS check for mixed versions. So raise a health warning if MDS daemons are not version matched. So this one was very specific at the time I wrote the feature, but I believe recently we've added just broad Ceph support for raising a warning if there's mixed versions in the Ceph cluster for any daemon type. But I'm not absolutely sure on that. Do any of you know? All right, I will try to figure this out. We'll keep this for Quincy. If anyone wants to work on something that we're looking at, if it's not been worked on already, please chime in at any time. Next card is Threshing Fragments. It's working on, I believe.
Yeah,
Where
I
are we
think
with
one
this
also
one?
needs review. I think, but it needs a rebase as well. I'll rebase it and Patrick, you can review it.
Okay. Keep that for Quincy too. MDS Memory Target.
This one I had abandoned because Mark Nelson wasn't happy with the current approach of tracking the RSS. He wanted to go for a priority caching approach. So I've taken this up again. Right now I'm working on a draft PR for that. So I'll probably send another PR based on that.
Hmm. Okay, we'll have a separate discussion on that. I'll leave a note. All right. And then the rest of these don't have Quincy labels yet. Me into Flush Sync R stats. This one's got an interesting history. So this started out as a tracker ticket by Shuhan. To have a command to propagate R stats up on a directory. So Jung was reviewing this and he had issues with how it was done, and he ended up trying to write his own version of this, and then he wasn't happy with it, and it got closed, and now both are closed. And I think now Melinda's looking into both of these PRs. Melinda's not here right now, so I don't think we're going to make any headway on this, especially now that Jung's left the group. So I don't think this will get done for Quincy either, unless something dramatic happens. So I think we'll table this for now and keep it in the backlog. All right. Next is a client complete support for lazy IO. So I know we had some changes to CephFS that Jung had made for lazy IO purposes, that CERN was very interested in, but I don't think we had any corresponding changes to the kernel client. So I made tracker ticket, and I'm not even sure what the delta is between the kernel client and the Fuse client is. And we're not really testing either one in upstream QA, so it's not really clear there is a problem. Jeff, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think we should cancel this thing. I don't see. I mean, putting this in means adding in goofy one-off interfaces for Ceph, like an IO cuddle or something like that to enable this thing or disable it. Nobody's going to write programs to do this. I think it's just something we should just get rid of.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna leave this a short blurb that
I mean, to be clear, it's not even really in the kernel. I mean, there's some definitions for lazy I/O, but there's nothing that actually enables them or does anything like that. So it's a bit of a dead feature.
so it's not really implemented, right?
Right. Yeah. I don't see any way to actually enable it.
Okay. That comment. Oh.
Actually, I take it back. There is an IO cuddle in there, but again, I don't think this is something we ought to do. I think we should just get rid of lazy IO because there's no there's you need a POSIX interface or you need an interface of some sort to turn this thing on and off. And the only way to do that is with some sort of like an IO cuddle or something like that. And I just don't see people writing programs that are going to do that.
Yeah, when I was talking to Jung about this however long ago, the way I was hoping to see us turn this on would be some automatic way with a subtree, a directory VX adder that affects the whole subtree's consistency statistics. Jung didn't like that for reasons I don't recall, so he added in just configs that turn it on for the client across the board, I believe. And that seemed to work well enough for what CERN was doing. I don't think we can remove lazy IO right now just because CERN, at least I know, is using it. And they like it. So can't really remove it, at least right now. And not until we come up with a replacement.
Yeah, I mean, the semantics of it are kind of unclear too. It's, the whole thing was designed based upon a slide deck that someone wrote saying, "Hey, wouldn't this be cool?" And so there's no standard interface for any of this junk. So I think it's just a bit of a misfeature.
Yep. Anyway, I don't see a huge push to improve this in the kernel, so just leave that as is. Like, no one's asking for this. All right, let's move on to root squash. Allow root squash mode via an MDS capability. Juana's been working on this, and he has a PR. And this is marked resolved. So I think, yeah, this is in Pacific now, Romana, right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. We can mark this as merged. Always wanted to do that. Next is CephFS HSM support. No one's working on this right now. I think it's a pretty cool ticket, but it's also it's definitely non-trivial. Doug, do you have any current thoughts on this?
So right now there isn't downstream demand for it. Unless there is, obviously it's up to you for upstream, but there isn't downstream demand for this right now.
Yeah.
I think that this feature would induce some downstream demand, but it certainly is not on the priority list or the radar from a downstream perspective. Although I echo your comment, it'd be super cool.
Yeah, so this is a pretty big feature, and I have the beginnings of like what it would look like in this tracker ticket, but it's by no means like I haven't thought about it extremely hard. And there would probably be plenty of reasons to adjust this interface that I'm proposing. Anyway, does anyone want to commit to try to work on this for Quincy? This would be an excellent excuse to dig into the file layouts and the MDS locker, which I believe you would need to become familiar with in order to actually do this migration in a safe way.
Yeah, how bad do you want it in Quincy in the first place, Patrick?
As you said, there's no downstream push for this. We hear about it periodically on upstream. I don't think it has to be in Quincy, and therefore I'm happy leaving this in the backlog. But if someone is really excited about working on this, then I support, adding this to the Quincy, and they can work on it full, over the next year.
Yeah, we'll see. I think it'd be cool as hell.
Did we lose Patrick?
No, Patrick is still around. We were just having a conversation right quick. We were just kind of talking about what if we were going to work on this feature or leave it in the backlog. And I for one, would love to have it in, but I don't think I don't think there's enough priority on it relative to how much work it is to commit Red Hat resources to it yet.
All right, I don't hear anyone jumping up and down, so we'll leave this in the backlog. Moving on to optimized rsync. So this card came about before we even were discussing CephFS Mirror, potentially as a tool to do the things CephFS Mirror is doing by enhancing rsync. But now that we have CephFS Mirror, I'm inclined to close this. Thank you. Do we have a concurrence from you?
Yeah, this can be done away with. Well, if once we have the R stats fixed, which is what Milind is trying to, the Mirror daemon can switch using the RC time for incremental transfers, or rather, not only incremental transfers, but also like only choosing those subtrees which have any changes in the entire tree. So yeah, this is pretty much redundant, I guess.
Okay. I think archive is the right button for this. Does anyone know? Trello experts?
Doesn't have a delete.
I don't think so.
Well, it probably won't
And
come
I
back to haunt anybody.
oh, there is a delete after you
You
archive.
need to, yeah.
I'll just leave it archived. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next one, multi-FS shared pools. And there's 2 tickets for this. Rejected this one and also this one. Yeah, I think we can archive this one too. At the time we were considering this, PG merging still did not exist, and also you kind of had to have a minimum number of PGs for a pool. I think it was like 32 or something, and it had to be fairly high. And if we ever wanted to get to a point where you had dozens or even hundreds of file systems in a cluster, you would have too many PGs being allocated for that. So it was an attractive idea to reuse metadata pools or data pools for multiple file systems. But now that you can have just even a data pool with as little as 1 PG, same for the metadata pool, it doesn't really seem as necessary. So I rejected those tickets, and I suppose we'll archive this one as well. All right. Next is snapshots, file level snapshots. And the use case when I talked to Sage about this was Dropbox style versioning of files. But there's not really been a push for this recently at all. Technically, I don't see any particular issues with doing this. It may be a little tricky with mapping the SnapROM concept onto files somehow, and rather than directories. There's no upstream push for this. There's no downstream push for this. This would just potentially be a learning exercise with a goal for learning more about snapshots and MDS, which, as we've talked about before, and I didn't really bring up in this particular meeting, a larger goal for Quincy, I think, is building our expertise in the MDS and not having such a dramatic push for a number of features that we've been doing for the last few years. So this would be a good excuse to look into snapshots if anyone is interested. Up. All right, we'll table that as well.
I'd actually be a little worried about that just because the amount of metadata that would be involved in moving to tracking snapshots on a per file level.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure on all the technical challenges on that, Greg. You probably know better than I do, but
I may be misremembering, but I just like the Dropbox thing of stages didn't really ever seem like a great idea to build inside of the file system like that, and just the fiddling around all the little inode bits would be a lot in terms of memory on the MDS. I mean,
well, I mean, you wouldn't even need a SnapROM context for that, right? It'd be another vector somewhere of snap IDs are allocated just for that file.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure either. But like I said, it's a good excuse to learn more about snapshots in the MDS. Okay, let's move on. MDS background forward scrub scheduling. No tracker ticket associated with this. So we now have stable multi-MDS forward scrub. I think a next step there is to just regularly schedule scrubs. I think that's the intent of this ticket. Imagine that would be a manager module, but I suppose it could be built into the file system and just managed by the MDS too.
Well, we can do it however we do snapshot scheduling, right?
Yeah. And probably better to build it into the manager anyways, because the hooks would work well for just the user interface bits. Talking to the MDSs directly to manage scheduled snapshots kind of stinks. No one wants to work on this? I don't think we have a tracker ticket for it yet.
I expect they might want it downstream. I like to see it.
Okay. All right, I'll go ahead and mark this as Quincy, but we need to, I think, offline write up a tracker ticket on what it should look like and find someone to work on it. All right, next is CephFS iNotify support.
That's a lot more difficult than it sounds at first blush. There's no real plumbing in the kernel at the VFS layer for iNotify. It's all done. So there's not like an operation into to add a hook for the file system to do notification. And not only that, I know Alviro is particularly anti-notification APIs, so it'd probably be a tough thing to get in. I think that this will be harder than it sounds. The code itself is probably not too difficult. I mean, you could just do it with some like caps, just request a bunch of caps and try to hopefully get something after that. But plumbing it in through the VFS is not going to be trivial.
Okay. Okay, let's we have had some downstream pressure for this in the past. So Jeff, you think the main barrier here is that we need to have hooks in the VFS for iNotify, but that's definitely going to be non-trivial. Is it at all feasible to work on this, or what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think you probably have a tough time getting it past Alviro first, just to get the VFS work, and then you have to actually write the code to make Ceph do it. And it's not clear to me what this would look like anyway. I know Ceph's, the Ceph's guys had some similar plans at one point, and it pretty much never happened because we were never able to get VFS APIs in. Of course, they didn't really have anybody work on it either, but different matter.
Okay.
I
Well,
can
as
take
far as
So
order,
I mean, we can keep it up here if you want. I don't foresee myself working on it, or if somebody else really wants to pick it up and do it and back yourself out. But I think you may turn out to be pretty tough to get it actually merged.
Doug, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I can see how much need there is for this downstream. I haven't heard of it, but that doesn't mean I necessarily so I can take an action to check on that.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. MDS C star. Yeah, this is. I think we just immediately table this. This would require a huge rewrite of the MDS, and we're not doing that right now. Pitchacles. So Jung had a PR for this that became stale, and Rishabh's blocked on me for this. I think Rishabh was going to revive this.
We talked about this tracker ticket a couple of times and I tried to table it both the times.
Sorry, Rishabh, the audio was not very good. Can you speak up?
Is it better?
Yeah.
We talked about this ticket a couple of times and you told me to table this ticket both the times.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't think we're having any. No other project has merged with Jackal patches. Yeah. I'll label this Quincy, but not really sure if we'll get to it. But I'll make a note to have another look at this Rishabh.
So this would just be for like libs FFS, right? Or I guess at the MDS layer.
Yeah, it was libCephFS.
Because there's the kernel with Jackal stuff never got merged, but that doesn't mean we can't use it.
So the kernel rich Jackal never got merged. Maybe we shouldn't be working.
Correct. Well, I mean, it's useful for potentially Ganesha could use this, right? We could show NFS v4 ACLs, and Samba could do the same, right? But there's no. I mean, the NFS client in the kernel, works with NFS v4 ACLs, despite the fact that there's no rich ACL support in the kernel, right? So it's really not. I think it's probably still valuable to do it. I just was pointing out that the client side bits for this in the kernel never got merged.
Okay. All right, we'll take a look. All right, I think we're already a bit over time. Probably just going to end up being an hour-long meeting. Try to go a little quicker. I know it's late for a lot of people here. MDS multi-threading. That's related to C-star and potentially, and we're not. No, we've tabled multi-threading for now. CephFS PP. Does anyone know what libCephFS PP is?
My guess is that they're just trying to avoid SO name bumps in the C API, because those are kind of painful. So they were talking about splitting off libCephFS to be sort of a bit more stable, and then have the underlying C++ API and ABI changes could be a little bit more aggressive. Sounds like a nice to have, but I'm not sure it's that valuable.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Because
Okay.
in the same way of how Liberatos and Liberatos PP.
Yeah, the PP stands for plus plus. Got it. Okay. Any shared library experts would like to work on this? All right, this is a nice have, so I'm going to table this too. Moving on, CephFS top, multi-FS support. I think this should just select a file system at the start, or maybe have, if we get really fancy with the UI, you can bring up a list of file systems, and then you can select one, and then it loads up all the client sessions for that file system.
Yeah, what I'd like to see is just a command line option that says, dash dash fs, whatever the name is, right? For that and for CephFS shell would be nice because you got.
Yeah. So I think the basic support of just adding a command line flag is pretty simple. So we can commit to this one. Though we don't have someone to work on it.
The tricky thing is, I think we need changes in MGR stats, manager stats module. I think right now what happens is if there are clients on another file system, the stats just throw up as not available, maybe. I think, yeah. So we need manager stats to be fixed to handle multiple file systems before we can add the fstop command params to show clients from a particular file system.
Okay. All right. Leave this in Quincy for now and find source work for it later. Think everyone agree with that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Well, the CephFS shell should be easier. This is really just a command line option for the mount. I think we can get that in. All right, manager volume supports snapshots for subvolume groups. So we turned this off because it seemed like we wouldn't be able to have snapshots on parent directories of subvolumes, especially after Jung's change to add a subvolume flag for directories so that they can't potentially share snapshots with other subvolumes, and you also can't rename or hard link a file outside of its subvolume directory. And that was to ensure certain guarantees for snapshot scalability. But I think that you can actually set a snapshot on a parent directory. I mean, I've done it, and in that it as long as with the same hard link guarantees, it should work. But I have not done any performance tests for this, and there may be a gotcha. So, and I think there is downstream pressure for this, so we do want it in Quincy. Just need to find someone to work on this. Because it is desirable for Ceph CSI. All right, any thoughts about this? All right, moving on. libCephFS SQLite. This is a GSOC project. a complementary library to the libceph SQLite library. So I'll mark this for Quincy because we're going to have a GSOC student, probably. There's no guarantee we get a GSOC slot. If we don't, then I'll take this out. But for now, we can say it'll make Quincy. Moving on to recursive unlink RPC. This was currently assigned to Venki. Venki, I know you got your head down in CephFS mirror, but I think you were planning to work on this next, right?
Yeah, post the HA part, this is the one on my list. So the HA part won't take time, which is next in the list after this in Trello. So that won't take much time. It's mostly just writing tests and fixing any bugs. But post that, it's just yeah, this is the one I'm trying. I'll probably be working on.
Okay. I will label this Quincy then. HA support. I'll mark this Quincy too. Test FS cache.
Yeah, I'm still waiting to see if the rework gets in this coming, if the kernel rework gets in this coming cycle. So we'll just have to see how that goes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we're just blocked on the kernel patches that David Howells is doing, right, Jeff?
Yeah. The current code is the current FS cache code is pretty buggy, so we won't want to turn it on until the fixes are in.
Okay. Let me know if I misspelled his name.
That's HOWELLS.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. I'll put it in Quincy, assuming he'll get that in the next year. I think just
yeah, I think you.
We'll probably just start with the testing kernel, and then once that's in stock, we'll put it on there too.
Sounds good.
All right, last on my list is client expose auth MDS for file dir. This is a tracker ticket I dug up. I thought was kind of cool. So this one is just adding a VX adder in the client. I don't even think it needs to talk to the MDS to just say where the authoritative MDS for a file is or a directory. The directories is a little tricky because you can have fragmented directories, and the fragments could be authoritative on different MDSs. So I think you would probably just, if you're doing it on a directory, you would actually look at the containing directory, containing fragment, and where that authoritative MDS is. This is just a small client ticket to work on. If anyone would like to work on it, otherwise we'll keep it in the backlog.
Keep it in the backlog for now. I might take it.
So Jeff, it sounds like you volunteered to work on it.
Sure. Yeah, you can give it to me. I'll take a look at it. At least take a look at it sometime.
All right. That's it for what's in the Trello. That's not. There are some things that probably are on Redmine that aren't on Trello yet. Is anyone working on something that they think should be tracked on Trello?
Maybe FS Script.
All right.
I'm really hoping I can get that in for Quincy.
Anything else?
I mean, the immutable file support. Maybe it's too small, but
Okay. No, that's fine. It's a good one. Gotta dig up. I'll dig up the tracker tickets for these. What else are we missing? Okay. This is not set in stone, so if we forgot something and you remember something you're working on that should be tracked in the Trello, please let me know. Sage uses this a lot for doing a lot of his talks, so it is valuable to make sure that, if you want, we all want to make sure that we publicize properly what changes we've been making to CephFS. So it's important to keep the Trello updated. So if you think of something that you're working on or we come up with a new feature, just remember to add it to, or have me add it to Trello if you don't have access, or we can get you access. Anything else we should discuss? All right, thanks everybody for coming.